Back when I was a kid, I remember that we moved into this new house when I was around 12. It was a fairly average house, but nicer than the one that we had been living in. It was my parents, two older sisters, and me living there. The house also came with a pretty nice backyard. It was not all that big, but it was mostly fenced in and had a large area of grass. There were some trees and bushes along the sides and back of it. I used to like to go outside in the front and backyard all the time. I was often playing some kind of sport or something. So I remember that not long after moving in, I was outside one night and about to go in. I would usually not stay outside after dark, and the sun had just set. I was going to go through the backyard though, and I saw this man standing in the back corner of it. He was at the far end next to a couple of bushes and one of the trees. I didn't know who he was, but I assumed him to be a neighbor, possibly the one who lived next door or behind us. I found it strange though, how he was just kind of standing there in the corner of our yard, and when I saw him, he was just looking at me. I decided to go inside at that point. Once I got in though, I didn't see him back there anymore when I looked out of the window. I didn't bother to tell my parents or anything, because I didn't really think that it was that big of a deal. But I saw the guy several more times after that. Each time it would be when I was outside, either right before it got dark outside or right after. And the guy was always in that same area of the backyard. Well, one afternoon, I happened to be at home by myself. I don't remember where everyone else was, but I know that there was a knock on the front door. I already was not planning on answering it, but I decided to see who was there. When I walked towards the front of the house, I saw that same guy standing on the front step. I still assumed him to be a neighbor. I wasn't really sure what he wanted or why he was here though. I walked away and did not answer. The guy didn't keep knocking or anything, and he soon left. The next time that I saw the guy was probably just a few nights after that. I remember that it was late at night this time. I was going to bed and inside of my bedroom. Just about everybody in our house had already gone to bed. I remember looking out of my window into the backyard though. When I did, I actually saw somebody walking through. I looked closer and noticed it to be the same guy. This time was different though, because he wasn't just standing in the far back corner, but actually in the yard. He was walking through, and then I saw him approaching the back door to our house. He tried to open it, and then he stood around there for a while. I didn't know what to do, and I was now really creeped out. The man ended up walking away though, and back over to the end of the yard, and then went into the bushes. I got up and went to my parents to tell them. When I did, they ended up calling the police. After that, I just remember that the police got there, and soon after, several more police cars arrived. I ended up finding out that they found the man in the neighbor's backyard. Apparently, he had been living in our next door neighbor's shed in their backyard without anybody knowing. He had tried breaking into several houses. Nobody in the neighborhood knew who he was. I'm really glad that I saw him when I did. I'm not sure what his intentions were, but the next door neighbor had no idea that the guy had been living in his shed. This story takes place when I moved into my first ever house after living in apartments for many years. I was excited to have my own house with a small yard as well. The house was not the nicest one ever, but it was decent. The neighborhood was pretty typical. There were a bunch of houses on both sides of a quiet street with fairly small yards. After moving in, I was working on unpacking everything one day, and I got a knock at the front door. I went over and saw a woman standing on my front step. I answered the door to her, and she said that she saw that I had just moved in. She had a box of cookies and gave them to me as a welcome gift. I thought that it was really nice of her, and I told her thanks. We talked for a short time, and she told me that she was my neighbor and lived down the street. Then she left, and I went back inside. I remember that a few days later she showed up at my house again. This time, the woman asked me if she could borrow a screwdriver and said that she didn't have one. I did, so I went and got it and gave it to her. We chatted for a very short time about basic stuff, and then she left. I remember when she was walking away though, I was expecting her to live maybe next door or right across the street. But I saw her turn and walk down the street, and then go so far down that she went out of my sight. I didn't even see what house she went in. I still assumed her to live on the street, but I was kind of surprised that she didn't live closer. So the next day she brought the screwdriver back. When she did, I asked her where she lived exactly. She just told me that she lived down the street, not too far. I remember asking which house, and she just kind of pointed and said you couldn't quite see it from here. So a short time later, she left again. I watched her walk away, and I even walked a little farther out to see where she was going. Well, she literally walked to the very end of the street and then left the block going to another street and went out of my sight. I was very confused. Why did she keep coming to my house? And how would she even know that I moved in if she didn't even live on my street? So I remember that one of the days after that, I was mowing my lawn. It was a weekend, so my next door neighbor happened to be mowing his lawn as well. We both finished at around the same time and met each other. We got to talking a little bit, and he said that he had been living in the neighborhood for over 20 years. I mentioned the lady to him and I asked him who exactly she was, and after I described her in the best detail that I could to the guy, he said he had no idea who I was talking about. He thought that the situation seemed strange. So for a few days after that, I didn't see the woman or anything. But then, one day, I had work in the city. I worked in a pretty typical office building downtown. So the really weird part is that after work, I was walking down the street to get to my car. I saw this car parked on the side of the road amongst many others, but I saw a woman behind the wheel of one of them who appeared to be the same woman who was my neighbor. She was sort of far away. She appeared to look at me for a second and then look away. And when she was looking away, I didn't have a good view of her at all. I kept going and I soon made it to my car. I was not at all 100% sure that this was the same woman, but it sure looked a lot like her, and I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid. Well, I saw her again several nights later. It was pretty late at night, and I was staying up much later than usual. I remember that I was watching this one movie that was on TV. So when it was over and I was finally going to bed, I happened to walk past the living room window in the front side of the house. As I did, I saw someone walking on the sidewalk out front. It was a woman, and it was strange for anybody to be out this late. But when I looked closer, I saw that it was the same woman who I kept seeing. I was so confused by this that I was just standing there staring at her. She then turned and looked at me. When she saw me, even from far away, I saw a surprised look come over her face. Then she started walking off rather quickly. I actually went over to my front door and opened it up. I was so confused that I wanted to just ask her what was going on. When I opened the door, I went outside and stepped out into the yard. The woman turned and looked over her shoulder as she was walking away. I called out to her, asking what was going on. She did not stop, but instead turned back and started running. She ran out into the street, and I got to the end of my yard, but I didn't leave my property. I was not going to chase after her, but I wanted to see where she was going. The woman then ran to a car that was parked on the side of the street across and a few houses down from mine. Then she got inside and quickly drove away. I was left as confused as ever. If she was my neighbor, why would she be driving away from here? I just went back inside and went to bed, and surprisingly, after that, I never saw the woman again. I'm still very confused about it. I'm not sure who she is or what she wanted. I have an interesting experience to tell from when I moved into an apartment a few years ago. So I moved into what I would describe as a pretty typical apartment building. It had several floors, and I was on the second floor. After moving everything in and stuff, I had been living there for just a few days when the strange thing started. One night, pretty late, I heard a knocking at my front door. This took me by surprise, and it seemed pretty weird to get a visitor at this time of night. I walked over to the front door and looked through the peephole. When I did, I saw no one. I was very confused for a few moments, but after that, I figured maybe someone was at the wrong apartment or something. But then about 10 minutes later, there was knocking again. I was closer to the door this time and started walking over. When I did, I could hear the sound of somebody walking away rather quickly. I opened up the door right away this time, and nobody was there. I looked around and didn't see anyone, but whoever it was would have had enough time to go around the corner by then. I figured at that point that maybe it was a prank or somebody just messing with me. I wasn't sure that anybody even knew that I was living here yet, but what else could it be? Nothing else happened for the rest of that night though, but the very next night, pretty much the exact same thing happened. There was more knocking at the door, and when I went to see who was there, whoever had knocked was completely gone. They came back like 5 minutes later, and did it again for a third time several minutes after that. So the next day when I was leaving for work, I saw one of my neighbors down the hall leaving as well. We said hi, and he seemed friendly. I got curious, so I brought up what had happened. I asked him if he had ever had people knocking on his door at night and running away, or if this was like some kind of initiation or hazing into moving in the building. He said no, he never had that happen and he was not aware of it. That night, it happened yet again. It was basically the same as all the other times. I actually tried to see who it was by getting up really fast and running to the door, but I didn't make it quite on time, because whoever was knocking had a head start. I didn't see them at all. However, the next night, I was able to see something. They knocked again, which would now be the fourth night in a row if you lost count. After the first knocking, I looked through the peephole, and of course, like always, they were gone. But I figured they would be back. They had to. So I camped out right there, just staring through the peephole. I was looking through the peephole for like 5 minutes straight. Then, all of a sudden, I saw this man come into view. It was just some random guy who I hadn't seen before. He knocked on the door, and right when he did, I opened it up. As I did though, he very quickly sprinted away. I called out to him, but he was around the corner before I knew it. So now I had seen who was behind this. I didn't know who he was or why he was doing it, but I wondered if he would be back. After that night though, he didn't come back for the rest of the evening, and he wasn't there the next night either. The next few nights, there were no knocks on my door at all. Things were fine for several days, until one day when I was leaving my apartment, I saw a bunch of junk mail on the front step right outside my door. The mail did not get delivered to our doors, but everybody had a mailbox in the mailroom. It was a bunch of advertisements and all that kind of junk mail that was right outside my door. It seemed to be like a month's worth of it. I was very confused. I picked it up and took it to the garbage down the hallway. I realized that the same person who kept knocking on my door was probably messing with me again. Before I put it in the trash, I had an idea, and I looked through the junk mail until I saw something with a mailing address on it. I found one, and I got a name of a guy. After getting the name, a quick internet search matched it with the same guy who I had seen in the hallway. For some reason, this guy was messing with me. I ended up going to the office and reporting him. After that, he didn't mess with me anymore. I'm not sure if he got in trouble or what, but I later found out that apparently one of his friends was trying to move into the building. I guess I got the last unit that his friend wanted, and his friend did not end up moving in, so he was mad at me. I had no clue about that though. What was I supposed to do? I'm just glad that he stopped messing with me. This happened a few years ago now. During this time, my wife and I moved into a new house. We only lived there for a year, and it was a rental house, but it was pretty nice. We moved because of my job, and I would get relocated from time to time. My job also helped us to find the house, and when we moved in, it was our first time seeing it other than online. The house had some furniture in it already, which was nice because we didn't have much at the time. We brought what we did have, and when we first got inside of the house, we both liked it a lot. The neighborhood seemed cool, the house had a nice backyard, and the layout was good. There was a main floor, an upstairs, and then an attic. We unpacked the things that we had, which took a few hours. Then I remember that we went shopping at some local stores to get some things like food and stuff. After getting back, the rest of the day was pretty normal. However, that night, I was downstairs and my wife had been upstairs. She came down and told me that she heard a strange noise in the attic. I thought that maybe it was a squirrel or bird or some kind of an animal, but really I didn't know. When I asked her what it sounded like, she said that it was loud. I walked upstairs and to the door of the attic. It was towards the end of the hallway, and I had never bothered to go in it yet, neither had my wife. We didn't really plan on putting anything up there. So I walked over to the attic, and first I listened. I didn't hear anything at all. After standing there for a few moments with it being quiet, my confidence went up. I was sure that my wife was just hearing some small animal or something. So I opened up the door and then started walking up the stairs. It was a very narrow staircase, and when I got to the top, I saw a very small room with a low ceiling. But as soon as I had reached the top, I also heard a noise. I looked to the back corner to see a man coming out from behind a large and empty cardboard box. The guy had really short hair and a bit of a beard. He came walking straight for me, and it was one of the last things that I was expecting to see. I quickly turned around and went back down the stairs. I had absolutely nothing to defend myself with in case this guy was dangerous, and the way that he was heading towards me made it seem like he was. The man did not say anything, but neither did I. I went all the way down the stairs as fast as I could. Then I left the attic, closing the door behind me. My wife, who was at the top of the stairs, saw me leaving in a hurry and asked what it was. I told her just to run. I could hear the guy coming down the attic stairs. My wife and I went down the staircase to the main level of the house and immediately left. We called the police, but as we were doing so, we heard the back door open and close. We couldn't see into the backyard, but were hoping and thinking that the guy left. We did not return to inside the house until the police got there. When they searched around, they didn't find anybody and the man was gone, but we were able to go back inside safely. The man somehow got inside of the house, which had been vacant for a while before we moved in. I'm really glad that he didn't cause any real harm. Several years ago, I moved into a new apartment. This one was nicer than the previous apartment that I had been living in, and I was excited to live there. I got a one-bedroom place on the first floor of the building in an apartment complex that had a few different buildings. So after moving in, within probably 2 weeks of living there, I remember that I got this strange text message. I did not know who it was from because I didn't recognize the number. The text just said hi, and I ignored it, assuming it to be a wrong number or something. Several days later though, I got another text. It was from the same number, but it said, "I can see you." I found this to be more suspicious now. I wondered if this was actually a wrong number or maybe something else, but quite possibly it was just a prank from a random number. I texted back asking who it was. They did not respond though. I got up and went over to my window and closed the blinds. It was nighttime, and I had a very large window that led out to a patio. Next to that was a small courtyard that connected to the other apartment building. I wondered if somebody could in fact see me, but I didn't really think so. I didn't get any more texts for the rest of that night. Either the next night or the one after, I actually got a call though. When I saw the number was calling me, I hesitated before answering, but my curiosity got the better of me. Even though I was really nervous, I picked up. I said hello, and there was a pause before I heard a whisper of a man on the other end. He just said that he knew where I lived and that I was home. I didn't know what to make of this. I tried asking him who it was, but then he hung up on me. By now, I was really creeped out about this whole situation. After that call though, for a few days, there was nothing. Everything was fine and there were no texts or calls. I was starting to forget about it until late at night when there was a random knock at my door. I was in the other room and instantly thought that the knocking might be connected to the strange texts and stuff. I didn't want to answer it, so I didn't. The knocking continued on and off for about a minute or two. When it finally stopped, after a couple of minutes, I got up and checked the door as well as the hallway. There was nobody there anymore. I was really nervous, but I didn't go to the police or anything. For the next few days, nothing happened, and things were actually fine for a few weeks after that. It had all stopped, and I was really happy about it, but I didn't know why. Then I ended up finding out something crazy. There was this guy who lived in the apartment complex, and he had been arrested for stalking a woman who lived in the next building from mine. When I heard the details of the case, it sounded very similar to me. He had texted and called her repeatedly before somehow entering her apartment one night. She managed to escape and call police, leading to the guy being caught. When I heard this, I realized why it had stopped, because the man was caught. I'm really glad that they got him when they did.